Welcome everyone to the IEA Bioenergy and UNIDO online workshop. This is session 2 on sustainable biomass supply. My name is Mark Brown. I'm based at the University of the Sunshine Coast in Australia. I'm the director of the Forest Research Institute here at the university, task leader for the biomass supply task in IEA Bioenergy, and I chair the communications committee. I'll be co-chairing the session today with Saho, and I'll pass the microphone to him to introduce himself.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, colleagues. I am Saho. I work with ECOWAS Commission here in Abuja, and I'm serving as Principal Program Officer, Alternative Energy and Energy Access. Until then, of course, I was acting as Executive Director of ECRI in prior. Thank you. Back to you, Mark.
Thanks, Ba. So we're going to start the workshop with a bit of a poll question. So I'll ask the team to put that up. So which are the most important potential co-benefits of sustainable biomass supply for bioenergy in developing economies? And we encourage you to pick your top 3 from that. So we'll give everybody a minute or 2 to respond, and then we'll progress into our panelist presentations. Okay, everyone should have had an opportunity to reply. Thanks for that, and it looks like our number of participants is stabilized for the moment, so we'll be able to get into the program. So you should see on your screen there now the replies from your colleagues here in the session, and you can see all have garnered some very good response. With probably, yeah, there's 5 of those sitting with 50% of the vote. So interesting to see that spread, and obviously there's a huge amount of co-benefits that can be derived from bioenergy and biomass supply. So keeping that in mind, we'll jump into our first speaker. So I'd like to introduce Michela Morese from FAO. Maria is the energy team leader and senior natural resources officer at the FAO Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment. Long track record and experience in the space, so she's going to give us a presentation from the FAO perspective.
Thank you very much for your nice introduction, and thank you for the invitation to this workshop today. So I hope you can nicely see my screen, and I'm happy to open and start this workshop today, giving an overview of some work that we've been doing in India to develop a new value chain, a new sustainable bioenergy value chain using rice straw in the country in order to avoid open burning. So let's go into the details. Let's give a context. In the country, there is an estimated 500 million tons of crop residues that are generated throughout the whole country. Residues normally are burned throughout the country, but the most important challenge is in some states of the country where mainly rice straw is burned because of the amount of time which is very limited between the two cropping seasons. It's about 20 days, 3 weeks maximum, and in these 20 days they have to get rid of the rice straw, and what they normally do is they burn it because it's quicker. Just to give you numbers in terms of facts and figures, it's around 39 million tons of rice straw which is burned every year just in the 4 states of the country that you see on the screen. And only in Punjab, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest state in the country, only in Punjab, it's 15.4 million tons of rice straw, which is burned in the field every year. Without mentioning all the negative effects in terms of damaging soil, increasing pollution, respiratory diseases, and all of this. Now, what we've done, of course, we've looked at the residues to see how we could make best use of these residues. First of all, these residues could be used in different ways, from feed and composting and others, and we have distinguished between the in situ uses and the ex situ uses, which is mainly at the industrial level. So application for chemicals, papers, or even energy, of course, in terms of thermal power plants, but at the industrial level. Now, what's the challenge? Despite there is a policy framework in place in the country, burning continues because of the 20 days, the limited time available between the two cropping seasons, the famous 20 days or 3 weeks that I mentioned before. So the challenge is really to create a value chain that could facilitate collection, mobilization, and storing of the residues, in particular for industrial uses, because more or less 70% of the residues are kept into the farms for their farming uses. So what's needed to take out the best from this opportunity to develop this new opportunity is for sure to provide incentives to farmers in order to stop burning, develop a supply chain, which is key, of course, in order to make best use of these crop residues for ex situ uses, so for industrial uses, and also to raise the awareness of farmers that these residues, rice straw, is not a waste, it's a resource. So that's also another important point. We worked to develop a value chain structure, just focused, in this case, this study was just focused on the Punjab state. And in this case, again, it was to make sure that this collection of rice straw within the 20 days between the two harvesting seasons was feasible. So this is the structure of the value chain that was developed. So on one side, it was to facilitate harvesting and baling to be transported into a radius of 15 kilometers, then to be collected into a temporary storage center in order to face the immediate intervention into the value chain within the 3 weeks time that we mentioned before. And then at a second stage, the possibility to transport it into an aggregation center where it's all these bales are stored, and potentially also these aggregation center could be used also as a wholesale point for farmers, for example, in case they need these rice straw for animals, livestock, etc., etc. So, but then let's go into the details of what would this mean in terms of investment. I mean, how much would this cost, the development of this value chain just in the state of Punjab? And this is, of course, there is a wide range of data that we calculated. And this is to say that this value chain in the state of Punjab in India would cost around $300 million. So, of course, it's an investment. And it's important to highlight that the development of this value chain in Punjab is foreseen, is planned, let's say, just using 30% of the available rice straw, as I mentioned before. Let's look at national targets in this case and how these rice straw, just the 30% that I mentioned, which is produced in the state of Punjab, could contribute to reach national targets. Let's go step by step in terms of sectors, energy sectors. In terms of pellets, the National Thermal Power Company is the India's largest coal consumer power producer. And this company aims to use pellets made from biomass to co-fire with coal. And in terms of national targets, we have a target of 5 million tons of pellets that are expected to be used every year in the country. Ethanol. So the aim is to achieve E20 by 2025. Both first generation, second generation ethanol are included. There are multiple feedstock that could be used to produce this ethanol. And the target is to produce around 9 billion liters to reach the E20 target by 2025 that I mentioned before. Compressed biogas. So the Sustainable Alternative Towards Affordable Transportation Scheme is the national scheme that aims to increase production of compressed biogas in the country as transport fuel. The plan is to get 5,000 compressed biogas plants by 2024 in the country, and the target is to produce 15 million tons of compressed biogas per year. So now let's see how the 30% of rice straw produced every year in Punjab, in the state of Punjab, could contribute to achieve these national targets. Let's start from a technical point of view. We said the target for pellets, let's start with pellets. The target for pellets is to produce 5 million tons of pellets a year. Using 30% of rice straw available in the state of Punjab and going through the value chain that I mentioned before, this is what is foreseen to happen. So is that we would be able, from a technical point of view, to not only to achieve the 5 million tons of pellets that you see in the blue bar, but even more than that. So we would be able to achieve 143% of the national target as a contribution. So a very good in terms of potential from a technical point of view. But is this economically viable? Let's see. Looking still at the pellets, using the Punjab rice straw, let's see if economically is profitable. And the reply is, as you can see, mostly yes. If we've looked at the difference between the production costs and the average of the price in the market, the selling price, and in all districts of the state of Punjab, you see the yellow bars, it's all on the positive side. So it means that in all the states of in all the districts of Punjab, the production of pellets by using rice straw would be economically viable. But let's go to the second sector, economic sector, energy sector that we mentioned before. Let's go to ethanol and compressed biogas, still in the Punjab, starting from technical potential. So what is the situation? Is technically feasible and how this second generation ethanol and compressed biogas in Punjab is able to reach and achieve the national targets. We said that the target at the national level is E20 blending by 2025, 9 billion liters per year. So in this case, rice straw, still 30% of rice straw produced in the state, and the Punjab state, would contribute to achieve up to 22% of the national target, which is, I mean, anyway, a number, I mean, a contribution. Let's see in terms of compressed biogas. In this case, the target was, that I mentioned, 15 million tons per year. And in this case, the contribution would only be 5%. But let's see if those two contributions would also be economically viable. This is the case of ethanol. This is the case of compressed biogas. So what it means? It means that second generation ethanol is only profitable in less than half of the district in the state of Punjab. You see the yellow bars that goes on the upper side of the table. While on the compressed biogas, the situation is slightly more positive in the sense that in all districts except two, the last two on the right side, the production of compressed biogas from rice straw would be economically feasible and profitable. So we've done all this study in India, and we have produced a video which is very short, and I would like to reproduce here because it goes directly. Okay, let me put it. Here it is.
जब मैं मतलब छोटी थी तब जैसे मैं अपने पेरेंट्स के साथ मतलब खेतों में आती थी तब ना मुझे लगता था कि यार जब मतलब ये धुआं वगैरह होता है तो मतलब कितना तकलीफ़ होती है कि लोगों को सांस लेने में या कुछ भी। तब मैंने अपने फादर साहब से कहा कि आप हम पराली को आग नहीं लगाएंगे।
You are not doing damage to environment and health only. In some way, you are burning wealth. If there is an alternative not to do it, why we should not be doing it?
तो उसका ट्रैक्टर वगैरह खाली रहता है तो वो उसको भी फ़ायदा होता है। लेबर है जो इसमें लोड करती है, माल को लोड करती है, अनलोड करती है, उनको फ़ायदा होता है। एक मशीन के साथ, एक बेलर के साथ 25 से 30 आदमियों को रोज़गार मिलता है।
If that practice of open burning is stopped and the farmer is able to basically make income out of sale of paddy straw, and then this paddy straw is put to good use in industry. So it's a perfect case of for a circular economy. In addition, it creates new jobs also.
जब से मैंने मतलब आग लगानी बंद की थी, हमारी खाद की वरतों भी कम होने लगी। सानू अगे वास्ते मतलब वधिया साडी जो खेती है होर 10-20 साल अगे वधिया तरीके नाल असीं कर सकते हैं। एक तो साडी जमीन की सेहत है वो वधिया हो रही है, एक साडे पानी की बचत हो रही है, तो एक वातावरण दूषित होने तो बचदा जी। सानू बीमारियां तो भी मतलब रोकथाम मिलूगी।
So, as you may have seen, you've heard from the voices of farmers the various added value that these. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There is still the page open. Sorry. I need just 1 second to stop it.
We can hear you. We can hear you. It's a nice music background.
You don't hear the background?
No, we hear, but we hear you as well. While you mute it, you can go on. Yes.
Okay, so I can conclude by saying that, so the conclusion is that there are technologies to use crop procedures. Of course, there is a need to develop a value chain, and it's important to raise awareness of farmers that rice straw is definitely not a waste, but it's a resource, and we should take out the best from the opportunities of these resources to diversify farmer incomes with all the opportunities that were highlighted during the video. So, of course, developing the value chain is the most important key. And this is a contribution, of course, to the 4 betters, which are at the core of the FAO strategy. So better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life, leaving no one behind. And I guess that this, lovely music has been a nice ending for my conclusion. Thank you so much, Ba. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michela, for making that very brilliant presentation. I think it's a lesson for us to learn. Of course, I see some questions relating to the environment. In particular, there were others that have been raised, but I think the issue of the environment and its implication on the 2G plans, and also how to integrate this idea that is putting biochar back into the soil for enhancing soil fertility. I don't know if there are any ideas or thoughts on those two. The transportation, of course, we didn't see any plastics. The transportation aspect of the carrying the bales and the 2G implication for the environment, and also the idea of putting biochar technology back into the soil. Thank you.
Yeah, so if I may just quickly, and then I will try to reply also in writing. Of course, we've done all our studies throughout the value chain, including also the transport, and this is why also the short radius of transportation, so 15 kilometers for the first step, and a maximum to an additional 30 kilometers at the second step, which means less than 50 kilometers radius in general, which is the range for a sustainable consideration. So indeed, yes, including also plastic use, which is degradable, and therefore that facilitates also the circular economy context. Have you studied the environmental implications of 2G plants? not specifically in the sense that we focused on the technical feasibility. So is it feasible from a technical point of view? So can we develop second generation ethanol from rice straw, and if so, what's the quantity? We haven't gone into the details of the whole study of the sustainability of the whole value chain, because that would have implied a lot more work. So we've looked at technical feasibility and economic feasibility. And in the economic feasibility, we've seen that it's not extremely viable, because only a few districts in the state of Punjab were brought positive feedback. And I see also how to integrate. Should I go ahead with the questions, or please guide me, because I see several and I could type.
No, I think we may have to go ahead with the next presentation due to time factor. I think we know we have exhausted the time allocated. So unless I'm guided by the organizers, I think we have to move on.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Michela. And we give you a round of applause. Thank you so much. So moving on, in our presentation, we move on to the next speaker that I want to introduce, as in the person of Himlal Baral, who is going to make a presentation, on South Africa, of course. And so is the presentation ready?
Yeah.
Based on
Thank you.
bioenergy
So
for
can you
landscape.
see?
Yeah, please. Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, good morning and good afternoon. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share our work and thoughts about bioenergy for landscape restoration and livelihood using case from Indonesia. So first, I will start with the landscape challenges that we have been hearing: food, fuel, fiber, or environment conservation, what we are after from the limited land we have. So in the next 15 minutes, I will highlight that if we design and manage appropriately, we can balance all within the landscapes. We can produce food, we can also produce biomass, and environment conservation goals can be matched within a landscape scales using case studies from Indonesia. So we can use degraded and underutilized land, or what we call marginal land, or wasteland, whatever kind of land you want to say. And those land can be used to produce biomass using climate smart agroforestry system that can have multiple outcomes. So let's briefly tell those colleagues who don't know about CIFOR-ICRAF. So we are a research institution. We work on various issues about forestry, including forestry and landscape restoration, biodiversity, climate change, and food systems. So these are the key working areas of our CIFOR-ICRAF: deforestation and biodiversity loss, climate crisis, unsustainable supply and value chain, transforming food system, and extreme inequality. So our research focus on these topics, as I mentioned, and we work globally from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, as you can see our global presence. So for the topics of today, like energy from forests and trees are vital resources, as we know that globally people rely on traditional biomass, such as heating and cooking. and there are sustainable ways to produce those biomass at landscape scale, so which doesn't compete with food or environment conservation. There are a variety of reasons that this there is a growing interest on bioenergy. So increasing demand, like sustainable supply situation, climate crisis, and renewable nature of biomass or bioenergy, most versatile energy source. And sustainable development is not possible without sustainable energy. And also the most important issue I'm trying to make here, linkage I'm trying to make today, is it's a link to landscape restoration goals. So we have been testing this kind of activities. How can restoring land and growing energy be matched in various type of degraded land? So we have been testing and demonstrating this in various parts of Indonesia and various islands in Indonesia. So the key question is, how can sustainable bioenergy be developed without to avoid food and energy trilemma and restoring land? What kind of species then, what kind of tree species we are talking about, and what are the socio-economic and environmental benefits and challenges? So I'll just give you a couple of examples of our work here in Indonesia. One is, this is the landscape where traditionally managed as a rice cultivation. So we just heard that rice straw burning in India, but here is not rice straw burning, but it's like a grass or weeds burn, and the farmer show rice, cultivate and harvest. So which is and then burning the biomass cause multiple environmental impacts, social, economic, also political impact. And they get a small amount of rice, very roughly about 1 tons per hectare per year. On that kind of landscapes, we are working with farmers, community groups, and other local government to changing this to agro-silvophishery approach, where without burning, rice is cultivated by planting without not broadcast sowing. Planting with a wide range of trees with wood, energy, and biomaterials that has the value of those multiple values, and also cultivation of various fish species. So it's agriculture, forestry, and fish all integrated within the systems. So what we have seen based on this system is no burning, so which means growing more rice from the right planting rice, more biomass, and no fire, as you can see that. So this is potential and possible. The another alternative we have been currently working on is sustainable market transition from coal to biomass. This is still work in progress. So agroforestry system, you can produce biomass, that certain type of trees such as legumes, Gliricidia, Caliandra, and so on, that can be produced, so that we can have a biomass that can go for energy supply. Leaves can be used for cattle feeding. The flower also attracts honeybees. So multiple products and services there. And then if we grow this with right combination, you can also grow your annual crops within the bioenergy production system. So this is the landscapes looks like. So if you the burn, it traditionally used to be burn, so now its landscape is changed. This is one example. So there are multiple type of tree species we have been investigating. What mostly they are native to the region, easy to grow, multiple benefits, and also landscape restoration function. So some of the tree species we have been working are called Namplung or Tamanu tree, which is Calophyllum inophyllum. Bamboo is, I saw some of the participant asked about bamboo biomass in India. So I've been also working that in Indonesia. Pongamia pinnata is another legume species which has proven to be multiple value as well as aviation fuel. So I will just highlight Pongamia here. So which is naturally pest resistant, salt tolerant, drought tolerant, and also nitrogen fixer. So this is a perfect candidate for landscape restoration. Grows on very variety of soil and land conditions, and can produce multiple benefits, as you can see. So honey, food supplement, biodiesel, organic fertilizer, and also it supports biodiversity. So this species, how our work is mostly we work on the spatial suitability of species. So the climatic and environmental amplitude of the tree are mapped or overlaid with the land condition of the particular landscapes, and we define whether this species is highly suitable, moderately suitable, or less suitable, and then we recommend which species is suitable on what kind of land. So what we call right tree on the right landscape. This is the tree looks like, and the fruits and seeds and the yield. So it can be quite substantial amount of oil can be produced from this species. So these works are published. Some of our work is mostly like open access, so publicly available from CIFOR-ICRAF website. So these are the examples. These are peer-reviewed journal articles and also forest news articles in a very short and easily understandable manner. So which you can see. So I will just highlight three key points here that we have been hearing, like that bioenergy, there is not enough land to produce bioenergy, which is not actually true. That's a lot of lands is already mapped as a degraded or underutilized in many countries, including Indonesia, that can be used to produce biomass or bioenergy. And bioenergy can destroy native vegetation or lead biodiversity loss. That's also not true if you choose the right species and right kind of landscape with right planting mechanism. So the bioenergy plantation can help. This is the example of 2-year-old plantation, so which is already colonized by butterflies, etc. As you can see. And food and fuel, which I just highlighted that. So you can integrate food production and fuel production at same landscape, same parcel of land, if we design and manage appropriately. Some of the key message is fossil fuel energy is a major contributor to climate change, and bioenergy is a viable alternatives. So if we design and manage appropriately, so we can integrate food, fuel, and nature conservation all in one parcel of land. So there are a wide range of sustainability criteria, approaches and tools. But what we can start with the right tree species, right crop in right place with right for the right purpose, respecting local community rights. So bioenergy can be quite substantial and benefit, can provide substantial benefit to local communities. So dissemination of best practices and identify potential for scaling up these appropriate tools and models is our next steps to make it more widely available. Thank you.
Thank you, Himlal. I'll just remind everyone, if you have questions for the speakers or the panel, to please put them in the question and answer section. And the chat window will be reserved for communication amongst the observers during the presentations. So we do have one question sitting in the Q&A section, noting that marginal lands tend to be so due to an economic definition of how they work, and just asking how to change this in the context of what's proposed here in terms of land productivity and access to markets and so forth. I don't know if you wanted to comment on that.
Okay, so I'll just make a quick comment and then I will respond by writing. So yeah, marginal and degraded land has many definitions of degraded land, so we don't want to go in detail. So here in Indonesia, we are using the degraded land is with the low productivity, low carbon storage capacity, and low availability of water. So that's the Indonesian government has already defined it and mapped some 14 million hectares of degraded land to be restored by 2030. So our focus is what kind of tree species are suitable on those already mapped, already identified and mapped 14 million hectares of degraded land. So we are looking solution on those particular already identified land.
Thank you. I might leave you to touch on a couple other questions that are in the question and answer section as you have time to type replies, and we'll continue to our next speaker. Thank you again. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
The next speaker in our panel is William Stafford, and he's with the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research in South Africa. Lifelong scientist working in the area to develop biochemistry, microbial ecology, systems biology, bioenergy, permaculture, holistic resource management, industrial ecology, and sustainability science. So pretty wide scope in the biochemical or bioecology space. So with that, I'll pass the microphone to William to give his presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to be discussing the opportunities for bioenergy and biomass supply in South Africa and focusing specifically on some of the sustainability aspects. So I think we're all pretty aware that bioenergy can deliver potentially substantive benefits in terms of carbon emission reductions, the lower emission of air pollutants and waste, and of course, socio-economic benefits such as green jobs. But I think importantly, we of course need to compare these benefits against some reference system, and that may depend on the country, but in South Africa, our basic reference system, our grid, and our primary energy supply is very fossil-based, very coal-based energy supply system. So as I mentioned, the bioenergy life cycle, it can be carbon neutral. Are you hearing me all right?
Yes, I hear you well.
Sorry, I thought I just lost you. Yeah, so bioenergy can be carbon neutral, but of course this really depends. It depends on the lifetime of the products, and we're particularly thinking about the carbon cycle. And of course, it depends on the energy inputs, what kind of processing, transport requirements, and even cultivation requirements are needed in the bioenergy supply chain. And of course, also very importantly, and hopefully you've heard about it, is the land use change impacts. So in terms of the bioenergy value chain, the biomass supply may incur, for example, either indirect or direct land use change impacts. And that has obviously significant consequences in terms of perhaps food supply systems, but also the conservation of natural areas, because of course land is a finite resource, particularly productive land. So when we come to think about what sustainable bioenergy is and what sustainable biomass supply would be, we of course need to think about the social, economic, and environmental criteria and somehow integrate them into a way so that we can assess and guide bioenergy for sustainable development. So there's of course many criteria and indicators in those different realms that we can incorporate into our assessment of the best opportunities, if you like, for sustainable bioenergy. And I think I alluded to this before. What's also very important is to look at the whole value chain, or rather the bioenergy life cycle, all the way from raw materials, which is typically land use, fertilizer and water, going into production of biomass, And then, of course, all the transport and processing, all the way, though, to the end user, the efficiency of using that energy and the end of life. So the life cycle assessment of bioenergy from cradle to grave, if you like, is very important consideration. And then I think what we're challenged with in terms of tapping into bioenergy and biomass resources is the complexity of the different processing pathways. In other words, we've got a range of different biomass feedstocks, and they're not all the same. They have different characteristics, different conversion pathways, and they can be used to deliver different types of energy services. So not all the energy delivered is the same. It's really different types of energy, heating and cooling, mechanical transport, and electricity. So we really need to suit the technology, or select the technology which is both suited to the resource and also the energy service that it plans to deliver. And of course, in doing so, we're trying to consider these sustainability aspects, but prime in the technology selection, of course, is thinking about the technology readiness, maturity, and of course, cost. So essentially de-risking the technology and getting it into the market at a competitive cost, at least competitive with current options on the market. So I mentioned the complexity of the bioenergy value chain. And I think why this is significantly important is because there's often overlap, and we see, of course, overlap between food, fiber, and energy in the supply chain. So there's a lot of interaction and a lot of potential for competition of resources. So I mentioned there's a range of biomass resources, and these are key to any bioenergy product or bioenergy service. And these biomass resources range from agriculture and forestry residues to, of course, wastes, so for example, urban wastes. And these are used to provide, as I mentioned, those valuable energy services that we require, a range of energy services. So what's quite important is to consider both, for example, the residues and wastes, which often have limited amounts. They come from existing processes, and the current biomass available, unwanted resources, as well as the future potential. So the question, as the last speaker alluded, is often perhaps a potential for additional biomass production, given land isn't used optimally or it's perhaps degraded. So I think there needs to be a pretty sound type of assessment to explore these kind of production potentials in different countries. And this AEZ methodology is one such tool, which essentially assesses the agro potential, the potential of bioenergy crops, but screens out, if you like, grazing land, protected land, cropland, and forest. So it can be used as a sort of sustainability tool to avoid some of those initial competition with existing supply chains. What's perhaps interestingly, when you do this and you look at the picture of Africa, we see that there's quite a good production of biomass in the top right there. That would be called the net primary production, how much biomass can grow. You see it's very much reflective of the rainfall in Africa, and of course the sunshine hours concentrated around the equators. But you see on the bottom right, what's perhaps quite interestingly, when we go through this process, which is a publication done by WWF and RSP, where they've screened out these protected areas and these high productive agricultural lands, you can see that the excluded areas are quite significant. So what's really left is quite a limited or small potential, if you like, for bioenergy to utilize dedicated energy crops, particularly when they're related to food or feed production. So in terms of South Africa, focusing on South Africa, the biomass and bioenergy supply is actually quite limited. So as you saw from the previous map, South Africa is a semi-arid type of country. So we're limited due to the presence of rainfall and of course availability of arable land and those food security concerns. So our national assessments, which we've done several years ago and updated, and is recorded in the Bioenergy Atlas of South Africa, has assessed these different resources, both in terms of biomass and also technical feasibility for different types of energy products. And it looks like, of course, the best biomass feedstocks, looking at those criteria, are urban organic wastes, and the lignocellulosic wastes. And in South Africa, a large portion of those woody wastes, those lignocellulosic wastes, are coming from invasive alien plants, as well as some residues from agriculture and forestry. So that's a lot more significant, or a much greater potential, if you like, to tap into, is these unwanted resources, if you like, these invasive alien plants. So currently, large areas of the country are covered by essentially invasive species which have escaped management, often in forestry areas, and are often inaccessible and at low density, and causing significant impacts to water resources, to productive land as well. And the South African government has got a program called Working for Water, and it's currently investing almost 1.9 billion rand in clearing these problem plants. So one particular issue with these invasive alien plants is that we don't really know how much there is in terms of the landscape, their distribution, their density, and essentially how much biomass located to infrastructure that could be harvested. So the CSIR have gone through a process to try and assess this opportunity by quantifying the invasive alien plant biomass. And it's basically used training of remote sensing data to get a good or a better understanding of invasive alien plants on the ground. And in fact, this layer, this remote sensing derived above ground biomass layer, has been also used for the South African Carbon Sinks Atlas. So what's perhaps quite interesting about these plants, which have often escaped formal forestry, in fact, they're eucalypts, pines, and wattles. Those are the predominant species, but there are several hundred others. So these species, of course, have escaped into the landscape. They're unmanaged, they're often mixed, and they're sometimes inaccessible. They're on steep slopes. So you can see on this value diagram, what we're more or less looking at is the difference between traditional forestry, where there's silviculture and maintenance of those trees, and invasive alien plants, or another similar problem, bush encroachment. And essentially what's happening here, as you can see, is that in forestry, we can select, or we cultivate and carry out silviculture for lumber and poles for high value products. And then, of course, there will be residues and wastes, some of which will need to be left perhaps in the field. For invasive alien plants, because of their mixed nature, and in fact, because they're often invading fire-prone areas, the potential for these higher value products are a lot more limited. And that actually means there's perhaps a greater potential to utilize this resource for those lower value but higher volume products. In other words, wood fuels and electricity. So that's where the opportunity, I think, for bioenergy comes. But of course, we need to think about suitability. That's essentially what we're talking about. Suitability of the resource, so that we don't use prime timber, for example, for electricity or energy. And we obviously need different conversions or conversion technologies to process that biomass into these different types of products. So the products, as I mentioned, could be anything from timber and lumber and poles, to mulch to improve soil fertility and biochar perhaps too, to some energy products such as heat and electricity, but also energy fuels, which could perhaps be used in the house for cooking, such as wood pellets and compressed logs. And then also perhaps additional liquid type of bioproducts, such as bio-oil, which could be perhaps further refined into transportation type fuels. So there's many types of opportunity for bioenergy in South Africa that I think can be brought to fruition if we consider the sustainability aspects and we carefully consider what we really want in terms of energy services. So I mentioned there's a reasonable availability of biomass. And if we think about the use of this biomass for electricity, it looks like quite a favorable option. I'm sure you've heard of our energy crisis in South Africa and the rolling blackouts or load shedding that we face. And of course, what we really need to maintain our supply is additional supply capacity. But what's often missing is some kind of dispatchable energy, particularly in those peak periods in the early morning and evening, where there isn't much of this other wind and solar, these other renewable energy resources available. And bioenergy, similar to other technologies, can be used to improve grid flexibility and provide this peaking, dispatchable, and baseload power. So if we bring bioenergy into the grid mix, the electricity mix, we can improve grid stability and maybe avoid the need for some of the future options which are seen to be required in terms of our future energy mix, which is shown there on the right, our integrated resource plan for electricity, and that's namely coal, gas, and nuclear, which are seen as the only perhaps options that can provide this dispatchable stroke baseload peaking power. So when we've done this type of assessment based on the biomass resources in South Africa, we can see that our assessment reveals, considering the sustainability aspects I mentioned, between 3 and 6 so Bioenergy can deliver between 3 and 6% of South Africa's future energy mix, and perhaps avoid the need for future coal, gas, and nuclear. So we've looked at this opportunity on a lot smaller scale, of course, and that really suits the dispersed nature of the invasive alien plant biomass. Transportation costs are a significant cost burden when one looks at big centralized facilities. So we've looked at small-scale gasifiers around the 100 to 200 kilowatts electrical range, and we've done some case studies, this one shown here on the Agulhas Plains in South Africa, and compared the cost of doing this to a diesel generator, which is in fact what a lot of people are turning to now due to our grid outages and the inability for essentially electricity supply to meet demand in South Africa. So these bioenergy options, these gasifiers, which are at about 100 to 200 kilowatt electrical, can be competitive and are feasible with diesel gensets. So they require a price of about 400 Rand per green ton for the biomass supply, and there needs to be some sharing of cost for that biomass supply because there's considerable costs in managing the land and follow-up as well after clearing. So it looks like that these options are feasible, at least in the small scale, and some of the challenges, of course, are managing the resource and getting the investments in this technology, particularly where some of this biomass lies in particularly inaccessible and fire-prone areas scattered across many different land users or owners. So there's perhaps many other possible users or end users, I should say, for bioenergy. And one other very particular attractive option which has been explored, and I don't want to steal the steam of Sharice Farai later, he's going to be talking to you about this, but a study done by WWF, of which I was part of, particularly looking at the invasive alien plant biomass, revealed that our biomass in South Africa could substantially produce significant amounts of sustainable aviation fuel. And of course, there's a good market price, a good global market price for sustainable aviation fuel. And some countries have really strong mandates for that aviation fuel to be low carbon. So achieving certified low carbon sustainable aviation fuel can really bring significant revenue into the country. So I think what's really important about this assessment is that it looked at the range of biomass resources in South Africa and about 3.2 billion liters of sustainable aviation fuel that could actually be improved by introducing hydrogen into the manufacturing process up about 4.5 million liters. And if we look at balancing our domestic needs with exports, it looks like there's a good opportunity for both. In other words, we can largely fulfill and replace our domestic aviation fuels while supplying significant amounts still to the market. As I mentioned earlier, the invasive alien plants are one of the largest biomass resources, and they can produce between 1.8 and 3 million liters per annum of biojet. But perhaps the lowest hanging fruit in terms of cost and quickest to implement is using some of the wastes or low value resources, the A molasses from the sugarcane industry. And then perhaps another opportunity for dedicated bioenergy crop would be a non-food crop, and what was considered here is the Solaris tobacco crop, which could produce about 1.1 billion liters of SAF. So for us to consider bioenergy in summary, the bioenergy should be focused on sustainable development. We clearly need to assess the whole bioenergy life cycle, all the way from land use and clearing and cultivation of the bioenergy, all the way to the transport, manufacture, delivery to the end user and use as well to deliver that energy service, because of course the efficiency of the end user is also important overall. And then to consider the sustainability aspects, of course, considering environment, economy, and society. And I think what's maybe very important for Bioenergy is that it should be independently certified. So several organizations have got the certification, the sustainability certification of bioenergy products, one of which is the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials. And then there's often complexities in the supply chain. As I mentioned, particularly for the invasive alien plants resource, you're looking at many different landowners who utilize that resource. And so we need supply chain management, aggregating the supply, and long-term offtake agreements. And of course, to maintain the social balance in the country, if you like, we need multi-stakeholder engagement and balance the local market opportunities with, if you like, the foreign revenue and the international exchange opportunities. Thank you very much. I look forward to some questions.
Thank you very much, William, for that brilliant presentation. I think it's wonderfully touched on many aspects, and that despite the brilliant presentation, there are a few clarifications that I think people, some wanted to know that why, talk about the negative, aspect, instead of the positive aspect of food feed, system. But I think you've clearly dealt with that one. Unless if you want to add, anything to that before we go to the next speaker. And then also the issue of Namibia, where somebody said 30% of Namibia is invasive bush. I hear you speak about that. And if you have anything to add to those questions.
Thanks.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
No, thank you. So I think I can just add, yes, maybe I did highlight the negatives, but we clearly need to know where not to go and where not to tread to make sure that we can really reap the best benefits of bioenergy and make sure it's sustainable. I think in the early days, we heard about, palm oil being cultivated on prime forests, which were then cleared. And of course, that was being claimed as a renewable fuel then. And when you do the carbon benefits, of course, you come up with a different conclusion. So we do really need to be cautious in this space. Thank you. On the bush encroachment, I would just say that, yeah, there's these two problems. There's, in fact, exotic invasive species, which are non-endemic, and they're, of course, thickening, and they're woody plant materials. And then there's sometimes indigenous or endemic species, which are causing bush encroachment. So they're encroaching on grasslands, or savannas are becoming bush. It's a slightly different problem. It's quite similar. And of course, climate change is influencing that woodification, if you like. But of course, the invasive species are exotic. So in South Africa, they've been mandated, there's legislation for their removal. They're listed species. And I think that's what is important. They have to be removed. Thanks.
Thank you very much, William, again. My apologies to Himlal, for wrongly saying that he's coming from South Africa instead of Indonesia. Okay, we move on to our next speaker, who is Craig Jamieson. He is the director and founder of Straw Innovations Limited. Craig was originally trained in horticulture and has a master's degree in international rural development. He worked in various areas, consultancies, also scientific research. The list goes on. So let me give the floor to Craig, please. Craig, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here and joining you. I'm already enjoying the stimulating chats and question and answers. I think we're developing quite a backlog of questions still to answer, but to thank you to Michela also for setting the scene so well on the straw and the rice straw issue in particular. I'm going to delve a little bit more in detail with a different context, but a complementary one to what Michela was talking about. We're in the Philippines, as mentioned. My company, Straw Innovations, has been operating there for about 6 or 7 years since it was started. And we are focused, as the name suggests, Straw Innovations, we're focused on straw, on rice straw. Let me see if I can get this going. There we go. So you may know or may not know that the rice industry and rice production is responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire global aviation industry. And the reason, a large part of the reason that it's so bad is because there are 750 million tons of rice straw produced, mostly in Asia, every year. And it's how we deal with that has a great impact on the emissions. A lot of it is being burnt, as Michela said, or just left to rot in the fields. And when you have rice fields that are flooded, that releases a lot of methane gas into the atmosphere. So why are we wasting this huge resource? Michela started to touch on that in terms of some of the challenges of collecting the straw and using it. There are different challenges in the Punjab and North India compared to much of the rest of Asia, where we're talking about humid tropic climate rather than in North India, where it's quite dry, when you can just drain the fields and come in with tractors and rakes. Well, it's quite easy, relatively easy, to collect the straw. But where you have flooded field conditions, those technologies don't work. Obviously, the combine harvester, number one, in the bottom left there, that works. But the other 5 steps in that process, chopping, raking, baling, and collecting the bales with a tractor, they're not going to work in those kind of flooded fields. So we have a big problem there. Our solution is to develop a world-first integrated grain and straw harvester that is patent pending at the moment and also works, I believe, uniquely in flooded rice fields. You can see the difference just looking at a field is quite stark. On the left, you've got about knee-high stubble coming behind the normal combine harvesters that are used. And then our system field on the right that we harvested in the Philippines is roughly ankle-high stubble, which farmers love because they're able to come in straight away and plow the field and get started on their next crop. Our business model is to offer a harvesting service and then collect the straw at the same time and sell that. We're not particularly technology biased. We're fairly agnostic. It could be for gasification, could be for biogas production, it could be for pulp and paper production, for all we know, or combustion. But ideally, the nutrients will be recovered and recycled back to the field at the end of that, which is an advantage of bioenergy use. We got a lot of help from UK aid, British donor funding to get an initial pilot plant set up. I initially led a study for about 3 years at the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines, which I'm based there, and then started my own business called Straw Innovations. And we got funding from UK aid to develop a whole system and put it in the field, collecting the rice straw and processing it. In this case, it was for biogas. Again, we're not developing the technologies ourselves for the straw use. We're focused on the straw collection. But the company that we partnered with is called Cube Renewables. It's a UK company that specializes in biogas, particularly smaller scale. And they had designed a small dry anaerobic digestion system, specially for straw. And so instead of having a big tank where you stir it and lots of liquid in there, you've got a sprinkler system, and it's more like an enclosed compost heap. And that gas went into those shipping containers, the blue things up in the top of the photo, and could be processed for CHP or for compression to make cooking fuel or even transport fuels. And so anyhow, we developed this, we asked the farmers what they wanted to use the energy for, and they said primarily for productive use, to make more from their farms, more income. So we've been focused since then on drying the rice with the energy from the straw and powering a hub. And so since that initial 3-year project ended, we've moved to a new site, and we've developed, we're developing a larger scale hub. And you can see that a little bit in the top right-hand corner, the warehouse and construction, and just beyond the chap in the foreground in the blue, just beyond him, it's hard to make out, but there's a grey box there, which is a flatbed dryer, and we've got a gasifier attached to that. And in the future, the reason that's so high is because we'll have vertical dryers for the rice, and we'll be industrializing that whole process. And there's one of the combines that we, as the starting point in the bottom left for our system. One thing I want to touch on a little bit, I'll try to answer some of the questions that were raised in the chat, particularly the ones that weren't answered already, but as I go. But one of the things we're talking about here is the sustainability. So let's look at the sustainability impacts of this. The climate impact is massive. Look at rice. It's almost half of all crop emissions worldwide is from rice, just one crop, about 50%, 48%, I think, of all greenhouse gas emissions from crops. And that methane, the red bar, can be halved just by removing the straw. And as a result of that, straw and a huge potential impact. That's without even talking about the bioenergy greenhouse gas savings. Straw Innovations was elected last year by investors onto the Diamond list, which is for the top 60 startups fighting climate change worldwide. One question before was about the soil impacts, and this is very interesting because at the International Rice Research Institute, they've done a study over decades. They've got a lot of long-term trials, and interestingly, they've been removing the straw at the base, all the above ground biomass every year for decades, and they looked at the soil organic carbon content, and it didn't go down, even though they were removing all the above ground biomass. The reason for that, because rice is typically a flooded crop. If you've got rice systems, or even 3 crops of rice a year, it's never really oxidizing very much. And so the air, because it's not getting in there, it's not breaking down that organic matter so quickly in the soil. And just leaving the roots from that crop in the soil is enough to maintain the soil organic carbon. So that means that rice is a massive, the straw is a massive resource for clean energy potentially. That's a unique element of rice production when it's flooded. The health impacts are huge. There's been a study in North India looking at just the health impacts in terms of reduced days at work, hospital bills, and so on. And they calculated it was $30 billion a year just in North India, and it's going up very rapidly. We calculated with our academic partners it's about $21 billion just in the Philippines, just by avoiding that straw burning. Straw Innovations, our go-to market strategy is to work with aggregated farmers. We can't go knocking door to door with every individual farmer. So we are collaborating with a company called SL Agritech in the Philippines. They are an exporting brand, Doña Maria, and they're the largest hybrid rice company in the country with thousands of hectares to harvest. So we're trying to line up a large harvesting contract for them, but we're also working with farmer co-ops, and there are some quite large ones there in the Philippines. And we're planning to expand from the Philippines, where we started. In the coming year or two, we'll be going into Indonesia and hopefully rapidly spreading across Asia with our solution, which is so badly needed. And our tagline, if you like, is "Let's make stubble burning history." that's the end of the presentation. I did make a note of some of the questions that were asked before. Some were around pre-treatments, Suleiman, Audu. Pre-treatments for biogas, I assume that was what you were meaning. The pre-treatments are needed generally, and you have in India, one of the pioneering industrial plants making biogas, Sampurn AgriVentures, and they had a sort of a shearing mechanism which broke open the straw. Instead of chopping it, it's more like a ripping open of the straw to make it more degradable and less recalcitrant for the biogas process. We try to avoid that pre-treatment because any pre-treatment is expensive, and therefore we try to improve the biology of the biogas so that there are enzymes and microbes in the system that could break it down in about 10 days, according to the literature. But we've never quite managed to crack that on the biogas side. It's still a work in progress. But there are many other pre-treatments with their own pros and cons. If you don't have a pre-treatment, generally the straw will just sit there for a long, long time. Lots of other questions I can answer, but shall I stop there and open it up to the floor?
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Yeah, just in the interest of time, we might keep moving, and if you have the opportunity, you can type replies to some of those questions, and then also we can return to some of those in the panel discussion at the end. So thank you again, excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Moving on now, we have a presentation from Tiziana Pirelli from GBEP. She's been the coordinator and secretary with that partnership since 2010, and it's got an extensive background and network globally in the work around this sustainable bioenergy. So I'll pass the microphone to Tiziana and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see my presentation in full screen.
Yes, looks great.
Okay, yes, I will give an overview on the application of the GBEP sustainability indicators for bioenergy in developing countries. And first of all, let me briefly introduce the Global Bioenergy Partnership. GBEP is an international initiative established to implement the commitments taken by the G8 in 2005 to support biomass and biofuel deployment, and particularly in developing countries where biomass use is prevalent. As of today, GBEP can count on 90 between partners and observers, including governments and international organizations. Argentina and Italy are the current co-chairs of GBEP. FAO is a founding partner and hosts the GBEP Secretariat in its headquarters in Rome. GBEP has a focus on sustainability, and in 2012, after a long period of the discussion, has finally published a set of sustainability indicators for the assessment and monitoring of bioenergy sustainability. These indicators are science-based and address all forms of bioenergy. They are voluntary, not legally binding, and have been developed to facilitate the harmonization of sustainability assessment and to support the formulation of policy. As you can see here, the set of GBEP sustainability indicators for bioenergy includes 24 indicators, and this set is divided into environmental, social, and economic pillars. And each of these pillars is composed by 8 indicators, and this was made on purpose because each pillar has equal importance in terms in contributing to the sustainability of the bioenergy value chain. The GBEP sustainability indicator can be used to measure as a tool to measure, report, and verify the achievement of various goals. For instance, the nationally determined contribution. They can be used, for instance, to assess the effectiveness of adopted policies and or the efficient use of funds to achieve, for instance, the reduction of GHG emissions. But they can also be used to show progress towards or away from a sustainable development path, for instance, to measure the progress towards the achievement of the sustainable development goals. A publication was done in 2018 by Friche et al., in which it was demonstrated that the GBEP sustainability indicators can support data collection for SDGs monitoring, and many of them are directly or indirectly interlinked with the various SDGs. The implementation of the GBEP sustainability indicators at national level contribute to develop a sort of country ownership regarding specific bioenergy value chains implemented at the national level, and is usually done with the participation of all stakeholders, because it's a sort of strategy to strengthen the capacity of national institutions to assess the bioenergy sustainability through the GBEP sustainability indicator, therefore setting the basis for a long-term monitoring of the sector. The results of the assessment is usually used to inform bioenergy policymaking within the context of low carbon development. So far, the GBEP sustainability indicator have been implemented in 14 countries, and all the reports are available on the Global Bioenergy Partnership website. Some of them is available also on the FAO website. I will take briefly this opportunity also to introduce an example of the activities that GBEP also implement in the various countries. Among these activities, there is also the training on how to implement the GBEP sustainability indicators. And these activities was done in Sub-Saharan Africa and especially in Togo and Ghana in 2018. The discussion, the dialogue with the multi-stakeholder working group that we involved in the training brought to identify wood energy as most important and the most critical bioenergy pathways in both of these countries. It emerged that this bioenergy value chain is almost traditional, and it has devastating effects on the forest landscape. For multiple reasons. First of all, because it's not efficient in a biomass supply, and is not efficient in the use of biomass and in the use of biofuels. And then because the demand is much higher than the sustainable supply. The need to reduce the pressure on forest from food energy production brought to a further discussion on how the various steps of the value chain could be improved. And in terms of sustainability, we have identified multiple opportunities that bioenergy and that modern bioenergy can offer to improve the current situation and the sustainability of the value chain. As you can see, this goes from the biomass production, for instance, through the adoption of agroforestry practices, but also introducing cascading use of woody biomass, for instance, the use of timber wood residues, but also, as it was mentioned by Craig before, the control over invasive species, the control over invasive species, the use of residues, of agricultural residues, and the sustainable forest management. But also it's important to improve the efficiency of the feedstock through pellet, for instance, and briquettes production from the various residues, and introduce improved technologies, as well as making the best use of bioenergy products such as biochar. The full report of this study is available on FAO and on the GBEP website, and I will invite you to go through it because now there is no time, unfortunately. And I just wanted to give the floor to my colleague from Paraguay and Vietnam, who will give us other example of the sustainability assessment done through the GBEP indicators for bioenergy in different value chain, and especially on biodiesel and ethanol in Paraguay, and on the biogas value chain from Vietnam, from the use of a different type of feedstock. So thank you very much, and for this brief introduction I gave, and now I'll give the floor to Guillermo Parra.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me this morning to present to you this brief presentation of the application of GBEP bioenergy sustainability indicators in my country, Paraguay. In first place, this is the brief history of biofuels, in particular in Paraguay. Ethanol and biodiesel, it all started in 1999 when we blended the ethanol into gasoline up to 10%. We went all the way until today when we blend from 25 to 27% of ethanol into gasoline and 2% of biodiesel into diesel. Here you can see two important milestones in this history. One, the creation of the REDX multi-stakeholder biofuel table, and two, the joining of Paraguay in GBEP in 1997, where we started working together in a joint effort to promote the production and use of sustainable bioenergy and biofuels through the implementation of the sustainability indicators. As the result of this joint effort, we currently have these two documents, one from 2018 regarding the application or implementation of the sustainability indicators in the production of and use of ethanol from sugarcane and corn, and also for forest biomass. And in 2021, we had this document regarding the implementation of the bioenergy sustainability indicators in Paraguay for the production and use of soybean biodiesel. Both thanks to the support of FAO and GBEP and the local authorities in Paraguay, and in particular the first one in 2018 thanks to the support of the government of Germany. Another important milestone in our history is the 9th Bioenergy Week in Asunción, held last year in our capital city, where our main authorities, such as the Minister of Livestock and Agriculture and Commerce and Industry, both have the opportunity to meet main actors and stakeholders from Paraguay and the region, and were able to give an extra support to the production and use of bioenergy in Paraguay. Main results and recommendations met already regarding the GBEP indicators projects in Paraguay can be seen here in this slide, we extend the institutionalization of the multi-stakeholder working group from ethanol to biodiesel, and as a result of this, currently we were able to increase the percentage of biodiesel from 1 to 2% into diesel. And also we had the opportunity to socialize and promote the results among top executives and authorities. Now the situation of the ethanol production and use regarding raw materials. You can see here that corn is now by far the main raw material used for the production of ethanol. This was possible because of the result of the project of the implementation of bioenergy indicators, especially from the economic pillar in Paraguay in 2018. And currently, as I mentioned, we are increasing from 1 to 2% the blending of biodiesel into diesel in Paraguay. So we can see how the implementation of the bioenergy indicators in Paraguay are helping to increase the participation of bioenergy and biofuels in particular in our energy matrix in our country. Please send me questions and comments to my email, because this is a recorded presentation. So I will be more than happy to answer your questions and comments. Thank you again for having me here today.
Okay, do we have the next speaker, Tiziana?
Yes, I will introduce now Professor Tuyet Nguyen Thi Anh from Vietnam, and she will give us a presentation on the application of the GBEP sustainability indicators in Vietnam on the biogas value chain. Professor Tuyet, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you, Tiziana. Thank you, Luke. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to talk about the case study of Vietnam, a life cycle assessment indicator for biogas in Vietnam. Actually, in the application of GBEP, Bioenergy sustainability indicators in Vietnam. So I'm focused on the indicator number 1 and number 4 related to NCA indicators. So briefly, some introduction about the biogas to reduce GHG emissions in Vietnam. So our country commit to reduce the GHG emission by 8% by 2030, and the target can be reached over 25% if there is international support in terms of finance and technology and capacity. So ways have been divided to help reduce GHG emissions. We focus on anaerobic wastewater treatment and biogas boiler, baggage for power generations. I mean here CFP systems, and the third one is installation biogas plant. In three, a scale, the big one, the medium one, and the small one. So in the case of of anaerobic wastewater treatment. So we have some typical projects that invest for food processing sectors, for example, like breweries. So we already have the installment system in Thanh Hoa breweries in 2006. This one was developed by Nether Model in one project. So we can use the biogas from wastewater treatment to use like a fuel source for the using for boiler, but we need to use the biogas boiler. We cannot use the coal boiler or as Thai boilers. And in the case of biogas for power generation, you can see here that the number of plants is increasing and get peaked during maybe 7 or 8, 10, 9 or 8 years ago, but now the number is decreases. The reason is because that time we had big subsidies for this kind of biogas power generations. In the case of biogas at the whole household level and industrial level for the like a livestock farm. So we for biogas utilization, this is data we get from our colleagues, Professor Thor, when we in the GBEP project in Vietnam in 2017. So for biogas utilization at the farm scale, the capacity ratio for utilization of biogas almost zero, but the flexible ratio for is huge. But for household level, the capacity ratio approximated one, but the capacity ratio for biogas at national scale is very low, around 5% only. So I did life cycle assessment for biogas production and use at size. So for indicator 1, we focused into the GHG emissions, and we also have I also have another data for the non-GHG emissions also. Here I would like to show some data related to GHG emissions. So you will see here that's the pictures of how we did the life cycle assessments. And come to the result. I could say that if here you can see the percentage of GHG from manual-based biogas, and in the picture in the right side, here the CO2 equivalent per megajoule useful heat for the cooking, when we use the biogas for cooking at household level and also with the farm level. You can see the difference between the manual biogas compared to the creative natural gas and LPG. You see that using biogas that achieves GHG emission can save about 70% in or 78% in comparison to the both scenario in which cooking is done by commercial natural gas or LPG cook stove respectively. But actually we should say that the potential demand for renewable energy from biogas in Vietnam in the livestock sector will be an integrated biogas system, include waste collection, gas production, where production facility and generators or production equipments. And the potential customer are also livestock farm, agriculture processing factories, and municipal waste management companies also. But in fact, however, practice shows that there is no biogas power plant connected to the national grid. And you can see the result is the number of in the first two case I saw in previous slides. So it's the number of the project is going down. And also in the case of biogas from the farm for livestock farm, so the use of biogas generator on farm is not effective. The application of biogas technology in Vietnam to treat livestock, I mean, here the big farm, the livestock waste at the household and farm scale currently face some difficulties. The number of biogas the big scale, the number of biogas tunnels being built currently accounts for a small percentage compared to a small percentage. Due to the limitation of biogas construction cost is too high, and the technical process of tunnel operation is also complicated. I mean, it's for the farmer is also complicated for them. In the case of medium size, many biogas digesters put into use have not been designed and installed to suit the livestock needs of household and have not been operated according to technical requirements. In the small size, the type of generator on the market are not popular and have not met the need of consumers. And another thing is the hydrosulfur gas. The average concentration is, now is more than 2,000 ppm. So this gas is an important topic because hydrosulfur not only wear out appearance. I mean, here is a stove. It also push some household off from using the stove for cooking. And the utilization of sewage sludge and treated solid wastewater from biogas digesters for fertilizer and animal feed purpose has not been guided for effective use. So that is some, I mean, the important things that I would like to summary in my talk. I'm sorry, I have only 5 minutes to talk, so I'm very sorry it takes more time. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much to Tuyet Nguyen from Paraguay and Tiziana from GBEP, FAO. Thank you for exposing the brilliant works being done by GBEP, and we appreciate your presentation. Thank you so much. We have, I think, just some few questions in the Q&A regarding updating data from Vietnam, if that is available. And I think basically those are the main. The others are actually, you know, bilateral. And then the other is thinking that this is a great topic. I'm not sure if it is referring to this particular presentation on GBEP. Is it, would this record be uploaded? Yes, this has already been answered. I'm not sure whether it's going to be on YouTube, but it has already been answered, you know, in the chat. So perhaps now the question on Vietnam, if you have anything. And Tiziana and others.
Thank you, I have already answered the question from the chat regarding the main characteristic of the GBEP indicators compared to other indicators in place that are more focus on woody energy, biomass, but the GBEP bioenergy indicators address all types of bioenergy. So this is the main difference. And as we have seen from Tuyet, also all the different scales in which these bioenergy value chains can be applied. And so I've given also more details in my written answer. Regarding the availability of the most updated data from Vietnam, I will forward this question to Professor Tuyet.
Yes, yeah, actually, we also we're also doing some projects for hopefully for updating the data. So the data I present here is actually the when the 10th the FAR project in 2017. Now I'm doing in 2 projects related to biogas. So hopefully I can have updated data and can be talk sometime at maybe it's around this time next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tuyet. Sorry, but let me take just a couple of minutes. Maybe
one minute.
1 minute. Maybe Professor Tuyet will be able to give us the updated data on the Bioenergy Week that will be held in Vietnam, in Hanoi next October 2023. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope so too.
Thank you very much, Tiziana. Thank you all the presenters in this GBEP presentation on the sustainability indicators. Thank you also all the presenters who have done a brilliant job. And I believe that we should be going into our next area of activities, which is the panel discussion. If I am right, Mark? If that is so, then
as we go into the panel discussion, we have a second survey question.
Oh yes, you're right.
Etta Florence has posted that. You should be able to respond to that question now. How can sustainable biomass supply in developing economies be stimulated? And again, top 3 choices from those available, and we'll give you all a minute. Once we've completed this poll, we'll enter into the panel discussion and introduce our additional panelist, allowing her to introduce herself, and then we'll open the floor to a discussion amongst the panel. So we have the results of that poll posted. Again, similar to our earlier poll, very widespread of responses there, and probably a good indicator of the significance and important role that or opportunities there are to entice or stimulate the development. I'll pass to Ba to do a brief introduction for Rockio, and then we'll go into a broader discussion.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. I have the pleasure to introduce our extra panelist in the person of Mauricio das Chavez from Imperial College London. Dr. Horacio das Chavez is a senior research fellow at the Center for Environmental Policy of Imperial College London since 2004. Her research area focuses on sustainability assessment and deployment of bioeconomy, land use, and natural resources, and synergy with energy, sustainability, and other SDGs. And of course, he's very active in GBEP as well. I would want to say that. So with that, going into deeper, I would give the floor to Horacio to make an intervention. Dr. Horacio, please.
Thank you very much, Ben and Mark, and of course to the IA for the invitation to be added to the panel. And to all the presenters, thank you very much for the excellent presentations. I just also wanted to add that I was also based in Kenya with an think tank over there, and I co-coordinated the bioeconomy strategy in East Africa. So we produce a feedstock analysis for the 9 countries in East Africa to see which were the potentials for there. And we had four topics, or 4 multi-sector areas within this bioeconomy strategy, and bioenergy was one of them. So I think that also from what the presenters showed today, I would like to just emphasize, like, for example, the context is really important into what is the availability of the feedstocks. Because policies, of course, are going to vary from one country to another, from one region to another, and also the governance, because the governance is different to the policies. What do people, communities want to do with these additional, for example, resources we've seen? Actually, I like the presentation from Michela, because we did this assessment almost 10 years ago through the first bioeconomy project that the European Commission funded, and it was called Biocore. So we analyzed the case in India, and I agree with Craig. I mean, the difference there is because it's drier than in other areas in particular in Southeast Asia. So from my point of view, I think that one thing that in bioenergy we really need to focus on, it's the improvement to the current systems that are there, rather than trying to think about large scale new additional crops. But some crops may have some potential. And with INBAR, the International Network on Bamboo and Rattan, we have been looking also at the possibilities of bamboo in certain countries. That was the case of Colombia, or that is the case in certain countries in sub-Saharan Africa. And also from my point of view is that from these projects that I mentioned, because there are many that are also related to what was presented today, I think we need to do a review from some of these past projects to see which were the challenges at that time, which were the mistakes we made at that time, and to see how we can turn some of them into a positive solution. Some of them have been mentioned, but I think that, for example, from this last short survey, the poll that was done there, I think that many countries, particularly in the global south, the financial side is really the one that it needs to have more attention, rather than continue to have more feasibility studies. And maybe, despite that it came down with a low points in that, the demonstration projects, we really need to have a little bit more on the demonstration projects, and how the financial system can be incorporated into the supply chains that have already been identified. And there are some others that we know that they exist, particularly in the global south. We know the cases in Latin America, in sub-Saharan Africa, and in Asia. So I think that we need to focus more on those and see where really the potential is. Maybe my last point for the discussion panel is on the report from the International Energy Agency on the pathway to net zero. And I think there was also one question in the chat about if it is going to be possible really to reduce the use of wood fuel or traditional biomass use for cooking by 2030. And I think that it's going to be very, very difficult to achieve, considering the large amount of biomass use in particular in sub-Saharan Africa for cooking purposes. So we need to rethink which are really the objectives that we want to follow apart from the SDGs in terms of energy access at the local level. Probably LPG could be a better solution at household level rather than an ethanol for cooking stoves. So this is just some of the points I wanted to make, and I'm putting in the chat the link to the bioeconomy strategy for East Africa, and also the report on the state of the art of bioeconomy there. And there are several cases of bioenergy in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Rokia. So I'll now ask all of the presenters, panelists to turn on their cameras, and probably will hold off and turn on your microphones in turn as you respond to the topics. Again, for those in the webinar participants, if you have questions that you'd like this panel to discuss, please feel free to post them in the questions and answers, where myself and Ba will be monitoring for those questions. But in the interest of getting the ball rolling, and this is for all the panelists, possibly a 30-second perspective, if you will. What is needed to seize win-win opportunities for biomass supply in developing economies? What hurdles need to be taken? You know, how do we actually capitalize on what we know is a lot of win-win opportunities in that space? And look, this is going to be interesting to manage, but based on the order on my screen at the moment, I'll start with Craig if he has any comments.
Yeah, as you say, there are a lot of win-wins that are potential. Sorry to be a bit bland with it, but it is very crop or site specific. In the case of rice straw, what was needed was something to break that technical vicious cycle. That it was very difficult to get the straw out of the field. The technologies weren't developed. There weren't many technologies even 10 years ago for using rice straw for energy. So there was clearly a need to, no investor in their right mind would just say, oh yeah, go ahead, break new ground on that. You know, there was clearly a need to have public support in developing and demonstrating those systems. But with other crops and other feedstocks, there are, yeah, I'll let the other panelists answer in more detail on those.
Thanks, Craig. Maria?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I would like to echo what Craig just said regarding the importance of looking at opportunities in a context specific approach. So it's looking at the win-win opportunities that we could find in terms of biomass supply in developing countries is very context specific. So it really depends on the national, local circumstances, and as Craig also mentioned, is connected to the crop itself, to the feedstock itself, and to the, like in the case of rice straw in India that I presented, is very connected also to the existence or not of a value chain, for example. So that was the case specifically in India. But a couple of points. So context specific, the importance of looking at co-benefits. So the suggestion is here to look at the existing bioenergy value chain, monitor and see what's the situation of sustainability of the existing value chain, see what it's missing, what are the potentials, and what is missing to get to those potentials. And looking at co-benefits with support in order to take out the best from the opportunities that a certain value chain could offer in that specific context with that specific feedstock. So those are my points from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiziana?
Yes, I will, of course, echo what has already been said, and I will add that I will suggest to promote integrated approach for the use of the various resources. This means that are available at local level, with taking into account, for instance, the nexus between wood, energy, and land, food, again, and the ecosystems. For instance, we have seen today many examples of in having an integrated approach. For instance, the cascading use of woody biomass, but we have heard also about the possibility to cultivate marginal land, and we have also heard about the use of residues, but also I will add intercropping, crop rotations, and the use of bioenergy byproducts as well, once again, to produce further bioenergy. So each of these opportunities comes from a very detailed study of the context and of what are the agri-food chains and the forestry also chains in place at local level. So yes, this is my suggestion, because to make the best use of land, of natural resource, we need to use an integrated approach.
Okay, Mark, just one observation that Luca sent. I think Himlal wants to leave, and therefore maybe we can give him the opportunity to respond.
Thank you. Yeah, so a lot has been already said, so I agree on that. And then on top of this, maybe what I presented, maybe we can align this bioenergy with local, regional or national restoration targets. They have many countries, they have their restoration targets. So if we align bioenergy plantation with restoration target, and also engage smallholder farmer and community groups under the agroforestry system, so that they can grow without compromising their food production. So we can integrate the bioenergy tree species in a right combination, so that can increase the food productivity as well as biomass production. Thank you.
So in the interest of keeping the discussion moving, I might ask if, with a show of hands of the panel members, if there's a particular item to either expand or add to what already has been said, or there's a very interested discussion coming up in the Q&As around the importance of reliability of supply and the economic realities of some of that. So did anybody want to expand on that initial question before we move on? William.
Thanks. Yes, so I think for me, the win-wins are really obviously ensuring that it's sustainable bioenergy. And I think to do so, of course, requires this context-specific assessment. It requires a systems approach. And I think it requires tools such as life cycle assessment, so we consider the whole value chain. And I think quite importantly is the third-party certification. So we're obviously thinking about global commodities in many cases, particularly the biomass fuels, shall one say, which will be traded and are traded. So one carefully needs to think about sustainability certification, so one can genuinely assure the benefits, whether it's carbon benefits or minimization of biodiversity impacts, etc. And I think to enable some of this to happen, we clearly need a lot more multi-stakeholder engagement and ways to break down our existing institutional barriers, because we're crossing between waste, forestry, and agriculture and the environment, for example. It brings new challenges. Thank you.
And Rokia.
Thank you. Just to add to these sustainability issues, I think the social part is really important, because in the past, around 2008, 2010, when there was this kind of peak of the need of biomass for particularly for biofuel production, and it went also to the global south, much of the unfairness of the systems were really focused on the social side. So I think this is a very important aspect. How much can the system pay also the producers of the feedstock? I remember that the collection of in the case of India, the collection of the straw was costly in terms of time for the farmers, and it was hand labor. So it was impossible, and honestly, it was unfair unless you put all the other type of mechanisms that could really help and make it also more socially fair, as I just mentioned.
Thank you. So panelists, I'm not sure if we're all watching the question and answer, but as I noted, there's a bit of a 2 or 3 messages or questions have come up there around investors having an important priority on not only the amount of biomass, but the reliability and quality of supply. And a few comments coming through there around potential strategies to address that. Is there any, again, maybe show of hands if there's anybody who wants to comment on the potential to improve reliability of supply as well as possibly quality? William.
Sure, thanks. So I think we need generally better supply chain management, from production all the way to sort of aggregation hubs, which are often needed to aggregate the biomass supply, because the biomass is obviously quite a bulky resource and incurs significant transport and handling costs. So there's obviously a need for maybe regional hubs to densify pre-processed biomass and aggregate the supply from dispersed regions, and then obviously improve the efficiency of the whole supply chain further down. So we're really thinking about all those reverse logistics and good things. And why I mention that is because the logistics often comes up as a very significant cost, particularly when you want to increase the scales of bioenergy production to lower your production costs. It makes it very soon unfeasible to start traveling hundreds, thousands of kilometers to get your biomass, at least by road. So yeah, we need that kind of investment in infrastructure and supply chain management optimization, I think. Thanks.
Very good. Any other comments on that topic? Craig.
Yeah, it was a question actually that was also raised in the Q&A before, was around the rice straw in the Punjab. What it's in that case, it's just one crop of rice per year, and then you've got to have all the investment in the machinery to get it out. Okay, it's easier because it's dry, but you've got the logistics and storage challenge of you're harvesting all at one moment in about 1 month, and then storing it for the whole rest of the year, and any equipment that you've got is sitting in a shed the rest of the time. So each context does raise its own challenges. In the case for us in the Philippines, we've been looking at ways, as you mentioned, of densifying, drying, storing, pelletizing perhaps, rice straw, very high ash content, which makes it quite challenging to grind down and make into pellets. But there are some exciting technologies coming along that could answer that. So it's a continual innovation. We're finding that the power stations, for example, and this may just be in the Philippines because it's got the second highest electricity costs in Asia, but the power stations have been built to take rice hull, the rice husks, but they soon ran out of that as a resource. And they found that it was, very profitable to run those power stations as long as they could get enough biomass regularly. And since there's 5 times as much straw as there is husk, answering that challenge of the logistics is going to be key. But in terms of economics, it's going at around, because of the demand outstripping supply, the husks are going for about $60 to $80 a ton, which should be feasible for even the collection costs in a distributed resource like rice straw to get that. But yes, you're right. The key is securing the supply. And when there are thousands of small scale farmers, there's a high transaction cost in going around and speaking to each one. So some form of aggregation is needed. And that's where governments can help by encouraging and incentivizing farmer cooperatives that could be more easily dealt with, rather than just slapping indiscriminate bans on rice straw burning, offering something productive that will drive the supply chain.
Thanks, Craig. Rokia.
Thanks. Maybe just to add to that is that at that point, maybe we should really consider the cascading principle and decide what is the best use of that biomass. I mean, if it is really good to use it for bioenergy, or if we should consider it on another use for bioeconomy. I think that is also a main issue once all this biomass has already been collected, stored, or been prepared to be used. That would be really the best case. Look at the best cases scenarios, where is the most which is the better use for that, or the best use for that biomass.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much. So just to add on the latest consideration from Rocio and from Craig. So indeed, the importance to look at the biomass supply in the context of the wider bioeconomy, because that's the need to look at the circularity. And therefore, and this is also why, for example, in the case of India, we consider the scenario of using just 30% of the available rice straw, because the remaining 70% with the idea to be used for other circular use within the context of the farmers, of the farms, for feeding, for mulching, and other composting and other uses in situ. So that's the first consideration, which is connected to bioeconomy. Now, the second consideration is the fact that the rice straw use in India has different challenges with respect to the Philippines, because of course of the watered feedstock in the case of the Philippines. But it's important to look at, in the case of India, and due to the fact of the short time between the two cropping seasons, so the famous 3 weeks or 20 days, that's the real challenge there. That's the real reason, beyond the tradition or the cultural issue of burning rice straw in the field. The main challenge there is timing, is those 20 days within which the field has to be cleaned up again in order to start with the second cropping season. So, and in this case, this is why the structure of the value chain that we have developed and proposed was exactly to have two phases of collection. So a temporary collection center and then an aggregation center, which would allow industries to go there throughout the year, because we talked about 15.4 million tons a year of rice straw just in the Punjab state. And if we think about the 30% of these amounts to be used, it's this could be available in the aggregation center throughout the year for industries to buy new feedstock for their industrial production. And the second point that I wanted to mention is, let's think about this as a diversification issue. So looking at an alternative, an additional option of biomass feedstock in that specific context. So the idea is that also these industries in a specific location could feed into the rice straw as a feedstock for their industrial production, as well as to other feedstock available in that region. So that's why the context specificity is so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Paul, I might pass to you, and we'll go to one of the other prepared questions as we get closer to the end here.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, let's look at the other prepared question, which is how to make sure that supply chains are sustainable and contribute to energy access in developing economies. So we can go in that order, maybe starting with Rocio, Michela, William, Craig, and if Tiziana and Co wants to jump in as well.
Thank you.
Rocio.
Thank you, Ben. Well, I think that the previous discussion covered several of these points. What's mentioned, they have to be sustainable, they have to be contextual, they have to be, I think, feasible also economically. We have to consider that, because most of the spin-offs of the startups companies, they are still using many funds that come from aid, from NGOs. So we really need to think about that. And as I mentioned, when there was this boom in 2008 and 2010 about how many supply chains were proposed at the time, we really need to consider what were really the main barriers that we had at that time. And I remember that they were mostly economically. We had to add one more, and I mentioned it before. I think Himlal also mentioned part of that. It's the landscape governance. What the locals, what the communities who are producing this type of material, if it is not at the industrial level, what they also want to do with this material. So probably local uses, as it was mentioned by Michela. We know that, but to make this sustainable supply chains, we really need to consider all the stakeholders and the local conditions.
Okay, thank you, Michela.
Thank you very much. Well, I would like to focus on two main points that were also mentioned by Rocio. I completely agree. I mean, sustainability is key. And when we talk about sustainability, we talk about sustainability in the wider sense that was presented by Tiziana. So the environmental, social, and economic aspects. And it's important to make sure that all the three dimensions are kept into consideration with equal importance, because otherwise we won't be able to really achieve the sustainable development and sustainable development of bioenergy in particular. So importance of sustainability, and in order to try to take out, as I said before, to take out the best from the opportunities that bioenergy could offer in that specific context. And the second point that I would like to echo with respect to what Rocio mentioned is the importance of a multi-stakeholder working group to be established in the country as soon as you do whatever kind of sustainability assessment or study on bioenergy. And I would like to highlight specifically this, because this is at the first real action that we do as FAO, and what we've done also in the past with the implementation of the GBEP indicators in several countries. So moving into the country, looking at the country context in order to start the sustainability assessment of whatever bioenergy value chain which is relevant for that country, and starting dialoguing with the national, with all the relevant stakeholders, because each of them could bring their own challenges, their own problems, and therefore it's through a dialogue that those challenges could be addressed and potentially resolved. Thank you.
Thank you, Michela. William? I think Himlal is gone.
Thanks. No,
Yeah, William.
Thank you. So not too much to add. Yeah, so I think we need to have this multi-stakeholder engagement and to carefully use tools to pick out the sustainable bioenergy options. And I mentioned the certification. So I think the sustainable certification is very important in terms of having a third party verify that and sustainably certify a product, an energy product. So there's, for example, RSB, Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials, or the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. They do, for example, certifications. So I think that's very important. It also adds to the market value. In other words, when people are assured that it is sustainable, assured that it is actually achieving carbon reductions, minimizing social impacts, protecting biodiversity in the environment, then the premium, the green premium, is increased. And typically you can assure a greater market price. So I think the struggle with bioenergy getting into the market has, of course, often been it's not price competitive with many other options on the market, and it's struggled to be competitive. So I think internalizing some of these aspects, these typical social environmental aspects, into the market price is very important. And one way to do that is to get certification and a surety of those benefits in the market. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Craig, are you around?
Okay, I'll just build on what Rocio was saying about the social and the environmental sustainability. In fact, she and I worked 15 years ago together on a paper, well, among others, the Gallagher review of the sustainability of biofuel production, and all the multitude, and particularly in Africa, the multitude of things to consider, like water availability. If you're growing sugarcane, say, in Southern Africa, the indirect land use change, which was the big one 10, 15 years ago. So many things to consider if you're going to grow a crop specifically for bioenergy. But if you could use co-products, agroforestry systems that produce wood as a co-product or byproduct, there are other ways of doing it and integrating energy into those agricultural systems. Of course, let's not forget that one of the big demands for energy in the world is for food and the supply chain. And so if farmers are lacking access to energy and their food is being degraded, or they even just sell it at a low price and someone else takes it and adds value to it, to use that abundant biomass that's around them on their farm as one of the feedstocks for processing, for heat, for drying, that can be a great opportunity to avoid a waste being environmentally damaging and transform it into something that can be very beneficial. I won't even touch on how you ensure that, because there's all sorts of, as was mentioned before with William, the sustainability standards and things, if you're going to go to an industrial scale and labeling. But yeah, I think I've said enough, just a big issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Craig. Tiziana and Co.
Yes, I want just to add that to allow for increasing the energy access, we also need to implement activities for building and strengthening the capacities of local stakeholders. So in terms of not only in terms of technologies of input or various sustainable agroforestry practices, forest management, agricultural management technologies, but also to increase the awareness on how much is important to access energy, to have access to more nutritious food, for instance, and to improve the livelihoods of people at the various scale. I would also like to highlight that it will be important to consider that there is no one bioenergy value chain who can solve the problem, at national level, but we should consider the range, all the range of possible bioenergy value chains that are suitable and applicable at local level, because they can contribute to increase the energy access at different scale, for instance, at household level, but also at farm level or at industrial level. So as Michela mentioned in her presentation, we have seen that can contribute to biogas. Some rice straw can contribute to biogas, some can contribute to some other form of energy. So it's important to take into consideration all the different forms to contribute to the final budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiziana. Any more interventions before I move the mic to Mark? Okay, Mark, over to you.
Yeah, look, we're scheduled to finish at 8:30 my time, 12:30 I believe for others, and obviously as we're around the planet at different times, but we're 4 minutes away from the scheduled end time.
Yeah.
So I might just again, anybody that would like to make a parting statement on the panel, probably keep it to half a minute in terms of wrapping up your presentation, and then we'll conclude. We'll aim to get contact details out to those that participated. There was some questions about contacting, so we'll manage that with the panel and what's appropriate. Craig, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say on that point that if it's breaking new ground with the new system, just demonstrating is so important, and having a rigorous analysis of the sustainability parameters with that. We've been fortunate to be working with scientists who are asking the farmers the questions: what are they using the straw for? What are their energy needs? Trying to make sure they fit, guiding our work. Also, looking at the greenhouse gas profile, we actually discovered with our biogas system, it was a batch system, so we had to peel back the lid, scoop out the biomass, put in a new lot and close it. And every time we're doing that, we're emitting methane. So how do we reduce that? And we tried different ways, and it's still a work in progress. And we, for that particular route, if you're talking about biogas, and so clearly we don't want to scale up something that is emitting one of the most powerful greenhouse gases. So getting these things right before scaling can really make a big difference in the social and environmental benefits that can come from them.
Thank you. Any other parting comments?
If I may just add, sorry, Rocio, I was quicker in taking the floor before you put your hands up. Just a couple of important points that is important to highlight. So the importance of course, the bioenergy value chains in every different context are again context specific. But let's think at the high importance of these new value chains and how these new value chains could bring value in terms of energy access, not only for cooking options, which means, of course, food security, access to more nutritious food, but also access to energy for cold chain. So to keep some foods that otherwise would be degraded because of the temperature, and therefore as a contribution to reduce food loss and waste. This, I mean, the potential is enormous if we think that a third of what is produced in terms of food is degraded, is lost, because of the lack sometimes of cold value chain. So just a heads up on this specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, and Rokia.
So yes, Michael, I agree with that. I was just going to mention exactly on the previous interventions on the co-benefits and this the scale and this idea of the other uses, and maybe also how we can link also bioenergy with other energy sources, and particularly bioenergy with solar. There are several examples exactly on the food preservation, on the heating systems also to be linked for agro-industrial uses. And I think that, again, particularly for the Global South, but also in Europe, there are several cases where they have started to link it. And I think this could also be a different type of nexus on the different types of energy that can be brought together for different issues, and again, the scales.
Thank you all. So I think we'll conclude there. Again, the session has been recorded, which gives us an opportunity to polish them up and make them available through the website. So if you want to go back and refresh your memory on a presentation or see the discussion again, it will be available. There was a number of questions and answers and discussion. Again, speakers have endeavored to answer those. We'll encourage that discussion to continue offline where possible. Again, we've reached our end time. Again, thank you to all the panelists. Very excellent presentations and great discussion here today, and on a very important topic globally and from the perspective of IEA Bioenergy. Again, thank my co-chair, Saho, and give him the last word.
Thank you very much, Mark. I join you to thank also all the panelists and the speakers and all those attendants for making it a very successful webinar. And our thanks and appreciation to IEA Bioenergy, UNIDO for this opportunity. So thank you very much. We hope to meet again online. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Michela.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you.